Okay, so as I was saying, when you look at the sharks, I think this is a nice diagram that just kind of hits home the fact that here's a species of animals that is really threatened and has been for a really long time. And one of the part, I guess the concerning parts about it is that these are apex predators. And so what they really do, one of the things sharks do is they keep thinning out the weak and the dying from the population. So because they are such good hunters and so dynamically made for swimming, their body, that fusiform shape, you can see the shape of their body is called fusiform, just like a barrel moving through the water with lots of muscles. They're really good at wiping out anything that's sick. If you're sick and you're lacking behind or you're weak, a shark's going to take you out. And that helps keep the population of those fish and, the other animals really strong. And unfortunately, they've been hunted for so long. And, I'm sure you're familiar, or maybe you're familiar with some of the great white shark stories of, that their fins are used for shark fin soup in Asian countries, and the rest of the body is just thrown away. And so anyway, here's some diversity and some of the issues associated with the sharks. So they have different modes of reproduction, and I've put in a video in there that talks about oviparous reproduction, oviviparous reproduction, and then viviparous reproduction. And we see all of those three various types of reproduction inside the sharks. So it's kind of cool. Check out that video. It's called Shark Reproduction, and I think it's a kind of a cool one. And so some lay eggs in egg cases, and that's oviparous kind of reproduction. Ovoviviparous is where the egg hatches inside the female's reproductive tract. So you have an egg, but the egg, is totally self-sufficient inside, and the egg hatches, and then out comes a young from that. And then there's viviparous, which is like ourselves, where the embryos develop in the mother by absorbing nutrient from the walls of the uterus, not from the egg yolk. Some obtain nutrient from specialized tissues developed from the wall of the uterus, a placenta, as is in most mammals. And so take a look at that. And then again, the population number of many species of sharks have declined due to the fishing for their fins, their meat, their oil, their skin, and there are over 500 living species known of sharks. Okay, now, this is interesting. The goblin sharks is typically found in really deep water, but I've never seen anything like that. I've never even seen video of these guys. So maybe you want to go on YouTube and see if you can locate any footage of these goblin sharks. Kind of cool looking. Very prehistoric. Okay, so the rays. These are also cartilaginous, and so they're very different than the sharks because of the change in their bodies. And so they have the pectoral fins now are expanded into wings that look like wings. Their body is what's called dorso-ventrally flattened, and so they're a nice flattened shape. They have those same gill slits that we just saw with the sharks, but these gill slits now are on the ventral surface of their body, so underneath, in the same place, in the same way that their mouth is also on the bottom surface of their body. Their spiracles, where the water's coming in and is needed for respiration, are located on the top of the body. So I put in a video on rays in there. Take a look at that video and you'll see how the design of their body is really suited for their lifestyle, because most rays spend their time on the bottom, and they'll cover themselves with the sand and the sediment as a form of camouflage, and they'll also then root up any of the mollusks, the crabs, and the other bottom-dwelling animals, and that's what they're going to eat. They most have a long whip-like tail, and so when it comes to rays, you might be familiar with a stingray, very common. There's a spine at the base of the tail with a poison gland, and if you step on the top of a ray when it's on the ocean floor, and oftentimes you can't see them because they've covered themselves with sand, so they're easy to step on. That stingray comes back up and slashes the back of your, like your Achilles tendon, so the back of your leg. It's really painful. They inject poison, and we deal with this when we go to Mexico on that trip, and it seems like every once in a while someone does get stung by a stingray, and the best way to get rid of the pain, because it's excruciatingly painful, that poison is very painful, is to submerge your foot into the hottest water that you can stand. And as long as your foot is in the hot water, then the poison doesn't hurt. It's as though the heat is it's causing the poison to basically fall apart. And then there's electric rays, which are really cool, that they produce electricity on either sides of their head. You absolutely do not want to get hit with an electric ray. That is not what killed Steve Irwin. Steve Irwin was killed by a stingray, and the stingray, he must have been holding that ray with, like his body against the ray's body, like their stomachs together, their ventral surfaces together, because that stingray pierced. Instead of flipping and hitting the backside of his leg, it stung. It pierced right into him like an arrow going through his heart. So that was a really sad day. Then there's manta rays. Manta rays, they are not on the bottom. They're throughout the middle of the water. They're plankton feeders, and so you'll find them mid-water. They've got gill rakers used for filter feeding, just like some of the sharks do. And they're really cool. They'll jump out of the water. They'll literally look like they're flying, or they'll also do what's called like a manta pop, where they pop up and then they just slam their body back down onto the water, and it, a whole group of them can be doing that together, and it sounds like popcorn kind of going off in the water, and you can see these things just jumping out of the water. It's one of the coolest things I've seen. And we don't know exactly why they do that. Perhaps they're doing that to get rid of some kind of parasite off of their body. Perhaps they're doing it to attract a mate. Perhaps they're doing it to escape from predators. It's not really sure why they do this manta pop, but it's pretty cool. And then all rays, give birth to live young. They're both ovoviviparous and also viviparous. And then you come across, too fast. So here are some rays. You can see the beautiful camouflaging that goes on with their body. Here's the manta ray. The spherical, remember, it's up on this is going to be on the top of their body, the dorsal view. This is where the water is going to come through, and then it's go out through their gill slits. And they'll use that water pressure to disturb the sand bottom, so that way they can move the sand and get to those invertebrates. A lot of those little invertebrates that are in that mucky bottom, they're pulling those suckers out and eating them. So that's probably the spherical right there on this. Probably maybe here and over here. Can't quite tell, but pretty cool. I like the rays. And then the skates are a lot like rays, but they are also dorsally, ventrally flattened, and they have large wing-like pectoral fins. But unlike the rays, they have a fleshy tail, and they do not have a spine, so they're not doing any of that, being able to sting you. They always lay their eggs in egg cases, and they're pretty cool. And let's see, they are also on the bottom, and they feed primarily on bottom mollusks. So all of those various snail-like creatures that we've looked at, shell creatures. And then ratfish. I'm not even sure of ratfish myself. Chimeras. They're mostly deep water. They have gill slits. They feed on the bottom, again, after those crustaceans and the mollusks. And their tail's much more like that of a shark than it is like that of a ray. And then here's an elephant fish right here. So, I'll pass this little guy right here, and we'll go on to the bony fish, the Osteichthyes. So this is a very large group, and really interesting, some of the pressures that caused Osteichthyes to evolve into so many different shapes and so many different styles. It was really going along, the evolution of these bony fish was going side and side with the evolution of plants that are moving onto land. And once the plants moved onto land and they started to provide shade from the sun, and so now you've got water that is shaded versus all open ocean. You've got river systems forming, and really allowed for the fish to really diverge in their evolution, and so you see lots of different morphologies or forms. Their skeleton is composed of bone, not cartilage. And so we've already talked about their tail, and their tail provides a nice forward thrust. They have flat bony scales, as opposed to what the sharks have. And then we talked about the operculum, which covers the gill, and that operculum is really providing a lot of protection over the gills. Something that's really characteristic of the bony fish is that they have a swim bladder. And so the swim bladder, which is not present in the cartilaginous fish, the swim bladder allows for the fish to be buoyant. They can control their buoyancy by filling it up with air. They can rise. They can remove the gas from the swim bladder, and then they can sink. They also have that lateral line for sensory information, and there are over 31,000 species, both marine and freshwater. And that makes up about half of all known vertebrate species. So when it comes to the vertebrae, it's the fish that have the diversity and the number. Okay, so you'll read about color patterns. There's counter shading, where the dorsal surface is darker than the ventral surface, and so this is really great because if you're underneath them and you look up, you're going to see a light stomach or dorsal belly surface to them, and so that's going to appear very much like the sky. It kind of hides them. And then if you're above them and you look down, they're sort of hidden because their back is a dark color and it looks like the ocean bottom or the deep water. So that's counter shading. They've also have disruptive coloration, bars and stripes that help break up the silhouette for predator avoidance. We see cryptic coloration that allows for them to blend with their background, and then many of them have warning coloration. We see this a lot in vertebrae in the animal kingdom, where you've got warning coloration, color that advertises that, hey, I taste bad or I'm poisonous, just stay away.